So there were
more charges.
Amended pleadings and amended counterclaims over who started the fight. And needless to say, they spent much more money than they should ever have spent trying to resolve that dispute. But sometimes getting somebody in there, and it doesn't have to be a lawyer. There are people who aren't lawyers. Just as an example that comes to mind, Rose Canaday, our councilwoman, runs a mediation service. And there are businesses that do dispute resolution, and getting somebody to look at the conflict from a completely disinterested standpoint is often very, very useful. Somebody getting you to say, or saying to you, look, I know how it looks from inside your business, but here's how it may look to a jury, or here's how it looks to me. Just pay and get on with it, and move on. Focus on the business and forget the dispute. But sometimes it's hard to do that.
Too bad YouTube wasn't around back then for that fight, huh?
Yeah.
We can post that. Does anybody have a question for our panelists?
Thank you. Our company is set up as a corporation, and we're looking to expand stock options to our employees. Is that something that you could advise on or point me in the right direction as to how to value the stock and how many shares and that type of thing?
Sure, we could help you with that. We would have to get deep into the conversation of how to value your business before we could value the stock. But definitely one of the things that you want to consider, there's a lot of tax consequences to that as well, and we would have to talk to a tax professional before we even got started. But if you're a corporation, depending on the type of corporation you are, how you're filed, there are ways that you can extend stock options to your employees. Now, it's going to depend whether is it just to your employees or is it going to be to employees and other people. It's going to depend, the rules are very different depending on which avenue you go down. But you definitely want to sit down and consider first on how you're going to value your business, because that's how you're going to value how many stocks and what options you're giving your clients. And if you don't have a valuation of your business, that was something you'd have to get valued by an independent third party, so you know what the actual value is. So that's something we can definitely sit down and talk about. And but if you are planning on doing that, you definitely want to talk to an attorney before you, and a tax professional at that point, before you ever get started.
If I could just add something. We work with a wide variety, both Rakesh, I'm sure, and myself in the litigation context, and my partners in transactional context. We work with a wide variety of professionals. I tend to see it when partners are suing each other, and one believes the business is worth $8 million, the other believes it's worth $14 million, and so we work with valuation professionals and tax professionals. So a good starting point is with an attorney that you decide you want to have help you do the transaction, and then they can bring in people that they've had experience with. Because if you just pull a name out of the yellow pages, odds are you'll get somebody good, but it may not be somebody that your attorney has worked with and can recommend.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. When we were in Washington, D.C. at the Small Business Summit, they had a big presentation on frivolous lawsuits. And I was wondering how much of an issue that is in Texas. One of the ones that they had was in California. A couple of people came into a guy's restaurant. He had inherited it from his dad, this little coffee shop type place. And they had redone their restrooms many years ago and got them up to ADA compliance. But apparently one of the mirrors had been broken, and they replaced it with another mirror. And the mirror was 2 inches too high based on ADA compliance. And this couple came in, and they did all the right things. They visited a certain amount of times. They documented everything, and then they walked him with a lawsuit that said that he was in violation of ADA compliance for 2 inches too high on the mirror. And so he is in litigation at this point. And you know, the U.S. Chamber is really fighting to change the laws on frivolous lawsuits like that, but I was going to see what the issues are in Texas and how we should protect ourselves.
Well, this may surprise you. Our law firm represents DuPont, among other Fortune 100 companies, and for their legal work here in North Texas. And I do think it can be a problem, and I think it has been a problem in the past. But there's you can err on the other side of that. I have clients who come to me and say that they feel they've been wronged for one reason or another. And these are business people, and we look at the cost of the lawsuit, and unless you can find a specific statute that allows you to recover attorney fees, it may not be feasible for the person to bring a lawsuit, and they want to know, well, why is that? Why don't I have access to the legal system? I pay taxes, and unfortunately, the bottom line is once you outline what it costs to bring a lawsuit and the associated cost, it just doesn't make sense sometimes. So we tend to look at the big picture. We counsel our clients not to bring lawsuits that don't make economic sense. On the plaintiff side, that's not always the case, and because of the contingent fee situation, that can be a problem. The rules do permit a party to recover their costs and attorney fees if the court determines that it is a frivolous lawsuit. And we have summary judgment procedures that allow a case to be dismissed by a judge who believes that there is no basis for the lawsuit. So there are mechanisms in place. Unfortunately, what we tend to hear about are the McDonald Coffee $6 million.
Right.
And I have to tell you, once you actually find out what the facts were, and you find out what eventually happened, that $6 million verdict was actually cut down until it was just a few $100,000, and this woman had third-degree burns that required skin transplants in her groin area. So, you know, it's easy to make conclusions from looking at headlines, and that's what the media focuses on. For every one of those cases where a plaintiff recovers a lot of money, there are many more where somebody just doesn't bother to file a lawsuit because of the costs. So I have mixed feelings about that, but I agree with the position that the U.S. Chamber takes, which I think is a pretty reasonable position. It's not saying we don't want any lawsuits, because remember, those lawsuits protect you. You can use them to, in the worst case, to protect yourself, to keep your business from being pulled under by some client who brings a frivolous lawsuit. So, and pay attention, please, to the elections for judges. It's the most ignored election in our legal or in our political system. People pay less attention to those than almost any other thing on the ballot, and yet, compared to how you interact with everybody else in the political sphere, you're more likely to run into a judge and have to deal with a judge because of trying to collect from a customer or because you're being sued, and yet people just don't take the time to just read a little bit about who you're voting for as a judge. Look at their training, their track record, who they practiced with, things like that. Information like that is available from the League of Women Voters and the voter guides. So take a second, protect yourself in that way.
Anybody, how much time do we have, John?
We're pretty much wrapped up.
Pretty much wrapped up? Okay, well, let's give our panelists a hand. They did a fantastic job.
Okay, does anybody want to buy a buck and a basket? And Vanessa's selling those.